So yesterday I left you with quite a few loose ends, knotted threads and tangled skeins. Inevitably, because I'm dealing with very large issues in a very short space of time. And I hope to tangle the threads and knot the skeins and loosen the ends yet further today and send you away in merry confusion. That's your problem. So I've been exploring mainly in-off, to use a billiards term, which is of course familiar to all of you, Schopenhauer. But I've been really trying to reflect on what that means in our own experience, and inevitably I've been giving you highly interpreted accounts of Schopenhauer. So if you're interested in what I've been saying from a philosophical point of view, please do read Schopenhauer himself. He's a far greater thinker than I am, and he's an extraordinarily careful writer, but he's, for a philosopher, relatively easy to read. I say for a philosopher. It's not bedtime reading. Well, it depends. But I do strongly recommend that you look at the man himself if you've been interested by what I've been saying, and realise that I'm giving you a highly compressed and interpreted account of his thinking. But actually I'm not really interested in trying to explain his philosophy to you. That's not my central purpose. I'm using him to help us to explore our experience. And today I'm going to start quarrelling with him. How dare I? As I say, he's a far more subtle and deep thinker than I am, and much more careful and far more educated and intelligent than I am. I simply have the great advantage of being a practicing Buddhist at the end of the 20th, no, we're in the 30th, whatever, the 21st century. 21st century, space and time, you know. The 21st century, when, I've had the benefit of very good teaching and a very live exemplification and exposition of the Dharma. So in all humility, I'm going to quarrel with a far better man than me, as he quarrelled with Kant. We all ought to quarrel with our masters in a respectful sort of way. It's a wonderful passage at the end of the World as Will and Representation when he gives his critique of Kant. He starts his critique of Kant with an enormous paean of praise to Kant, which is extremely moving. So this is my small attempt at a paean of praise to the great Schopenhauer, who's contributed to our ability to practice the Dhamma today, I believe. But before I start to quarrel with the great man, let me just recapitulate where we've come from and where we've got to. Because in a way, what I did yesterday was present you with various paradoxes and inconsistencies that no doubt the smart noticed and the smartest saw beyond. So we started off by just looking at the way we know, and we looked at the way we know through perception. And I hope we came to recognise more and more clearly that knowledge through perception is not knowledge of a real external world, as it were, but a knowledge of representations. Representations that are the junction of subject and object within space and time, and governed by causality. But all representation, not what Kant and then Schopenhauer called the thing in itself. They tell you the how of things and the what of things, what they're constructed of, and how they come into being, how they arise. In other words, how they operate in the world of conditioned co-production. There's a point of intersection of his philosophy with Buddhism there. But they don't tell us the that of things, that things are. what in later Mahayana philosophy is called tathata, thusness or suchness, the suchness of things, not the how or the why or the consistency, but the thusness of things, the haikicity, if you want to get pompous, not the quiddity, but the haikicity. So yes, a knowledge through perception gives us knowledge merely of representations, but of what they are representations, we have no knowledge. By definition, as soon as we start to make something an object of perception, it ceases to be a thing in itself and becomes a representation. We cannot know anything through perception but representations. Other very important mode of knowledge is reason, our intellects, which first of all describe representations in terms of concepts, which are therefore representations of representations. We generalize from our experience, apply concepts to those generalizations, and then we're able to transport our experience, explain it to each other, remember it for ourselves in the future, learn from it, and extrapolate into the future. So knowledge through reason, knowledge through concepts, is merely knowledge of representations, of perceptual representations. It doesn't give us any knowledge beyond that, according to Schopenhauer, and I think he has to be right. And again, this is very much in conformity with the Buddha's own teaching, that reality itself is beyond reason. Tarka is beyond logic. Reality itself cannot be thought as knowledge. It has to be known directly. But so far, in our investigation, we haven't found in perception and reason ways of knowing reality. We can know representations of reality. We can know conceptualizations about those representations, but we don't yet know reality. We know distant, distorted representations of reality under the heading of subject and object, or distributed within subject and object under the headings, under the forms of space and time and of causality. But we don't know the thing itself, the reality itself. We don't know the thusness of things. And part of Schopenhauer's quarrel with academic philosophy was that it was not interested in the thusness of things, but only in the how and the constitution, the construction of things. It's very useful indeed, but it misses something that is constantly begged, if you see what I mean. So that when we describe the world as representations, we inevitably feel but, and we can't really quite even articulate what that but is. We feel, yes, you're absolutely right, I can't get away from your argument, but there's something more. There has to be more. There's something more to it all that, yes, representation cannot represent, that conceptualization cannot conceive. There has to be something more. Thus far, in a way, we're on quite straightforward ground. It's just a matter of consulting our experience, and it's quite obvious to us. We can, through the examination of concept and thereby of representation, we can know something about the negatives of reality itself, of the thing in itself. We can know that the thing in itself is not subject and object, because those are added in representation, in the act of representation. They are what representation is constructed of, to put it rather simplistically. We know it's not to do with space and time, because they're the forms under which subject and object appear. we know it's not to do with causality, because causality is to do with the way in which representations arrange themselves and in which concepts can be related to each other. So it's, as it were, after the thing in itself, not from the thing in itself. But we saw yesterday, perhaps a little shakily, we saw that Schopenhauer suggests, and I think extremely usefully, that we do have one object, one representation that we've got a privileged access to. All the world of representation is for us, so to speak, mere representation. But there's one object of representation that we do have access to the inner side of, and that is our own bodies. We've got access to the inner side of our own bodies. Now, talking to a few people today, I realised it's very easy to mistake what he's saying. He's not talking about having access to our own inner feelings and our own inner sensations and so forth, because those are also representations. What he's talking about is something that cannot be a representation, if you see what I mean. So it's extremely difficult, therefore, to talk about it, because our language is constructed out of representations. It's about representations. But he calls it will, which I'm going to quarrel with in a little while. He calls it will because what he says is that in our lives, we find ourselves doing things, and we have an inner access to that activity. Not in terms of access to our thoughts or our wishes or our desires. I mean something more than that, more deep than that, something that cannot be made an object in representation. I tried just to explore that a little bit today in the meditation by inviting you to look at the life in your body. And again, of course, this is only a metaphorical approach to it. What do we mean by that? Well, we're at this point where all definitions start to lead us into a false clarity. So what I'm trying to do in that meditation was inviting us to step outside the representations to this, what he called, immediate consciousness of what he called will. Sometimes he called it life, which I find that easier to approach. The life in us, which is not a particular thing. It's not something you can say, there it is. But you have a consciousness of life. The life in the body, he says. The life of the body. So when I hold up my hand, I look at it and I'm conscious of it as a representation. I'm conscious of the representation of the hand that appears, as it were, before me, as it were, because it's a representation, so it must be an as it were. But I'm also conscious within the hand, so to speak. I don't mean I'm conscious of the sensations in the hand. I don't even mean necessarily of, the kinesthetic sense, the sense of distribution in space, of the movement of the body in space. I mean something much less articulate, the sense of life, the sense of the body as alive. And that perhaps takes us away from all the problems that are associated with the word will. He called it will because he saw in the human being the interface, so to speak, between action and this life force as will. What motivates, not motivates us, because motivations are part of representation, but is this something inchoate, interacting with motivation and forming action. But perhaps let's sort of allow ourselves to slip a little way from Schopenhauer's terminology, which I've read The World as Will and Representation several times, and each time I think, oh, that's what he means. And And then when I read it again, I realise I got it wrong. Very subtle point that he's making, but it is a real experiential point. He's saying that in our inner consciousness, in our consciousness of our bodies, we have privileged access to the inner side of one representation. We do know the thing in itself, at least sort of by implication, or by a sense of it sort of pressing upon us, even though we don't know what it is. This mysterious occlusion, this mysterious hidden thing. He keeps on using this phrase in Latin, mysteria occulta, this hidden mystery, which is our own life. So, on the one hand, it's something mysterious which you can never fully articulate, and that when we start to articulate it, we're subsuming it more and more under the headings of representation and conception, which is, of course, falsifying it further and further. But at the same time, it's not something merely speculative and metaphysical in the sense that Kant conclusively dismissed. It's not Leibniz or anything like that. It's something that you can have immediate consciousness of. So I don't know whether this has got us a little bit closer to what he's talking about, but I think this terminology of the life of the body, for me, speaks more of what he's talking about than the word will, which implies motivation so easily, although that's not what he meant, and he differentiates will from motivation. So he says that this inner aspect of our immediate consciousness of the thing in itself in our bodies is a clue to the thing in itself everywhere. Because the thing in itself, the inner side of everything, to you and you and you, and the table, the chair and the floor and so on, everything, the inner life of everything, according to his reading, must be sort of essentially the same, because life, the thing in itself, is beyond space and time. It's not yet entered into space and time. It enters into space and time as all of this. But outside space and time, from its own side, to use what Buddhism rejects, it cannot be subsumed to the categories of space and time, including of number. It cannot be one, it cannot be two. And so you can't differentiate the life in me from the life in you. Within space and time, differentiation takes place. The principium individuationis, the principle of individuation, which separates the thing in itself into the multiplicity, the multiformity of the world of representation, the world of cause and effect, the world of space and time. He says we've got two other modes of approach to the thing in itself, two other ways in which we begin to bridge the gap or jump the boundary. And the first, if you remember, was aesthetic experience. It doesn't exactly jump the boundary, but it takes you as close to the boundary as you can get. And you experience the, according to Schopenhauer's aesthetics, you experience the thing in itself manifesting in its most adequate form, outside the boundaries of time and beyond the impulsion of the will, the life force. You experience it free from causality. So you come very close to the edge of the way things really are in aesthetic experience, which is why he considers it so important. And secondly, you have, perhaps in a certain sense, an even more direct experience of it in your ethical sense, by which he means not your sense of right and wrong exactly, but your response to the life in the world around you, the life in others. And you sense, as you become more ethically attuned, you sense that life in others as the same as the life in you. And you become increasingly as incapable of harming that life in the world beyond you as you do of harming it in yourself. So thus far, Schopenhauer takes us in a very interesting and important way, and begins to open up, I think, an area of inquiry which I'm not going to be able to conclude, but I want to nudge a bit further into from a more conventionally Buddhist point of view. Because it seems to me there's something of a problem with his conception of the thing in itself as will. Because he identifies it as will, it leads to certain conclusions about it and its nature. Because he says that our experiences of it is the will that drives us in our actions to survive, to succeed, to struggle, and so forth. Because he calls it by that name as, for him, the highest manifestation of the thing in itself, in us, I think that distorts his understanding of the thing in itself. Please, it's greater mind than mine. He'd no doubt quash me immediately if I said it to his face. And he spoke perfect English. He really did. He thought of writing The World of Will and Representation in English because he thought that it would reach a better audience. And he felt he could express himself more fully in English. Very interesting. Anyway, yes, I don't know whether I'm just setting up a straw man and fighting with that. Never mind. Subhuti Schopenhauer, I believe, is limited by his identification of the thing in itself, of reality, as will. So he saw will as the fundamental force that is, as it were, the other side of everything. That is the force that through the green fuse drives the flower. That is what makes the stone drop, what makes the hurricanes blow, and so forth, which is the life in everything at every level. He saw it as fundamentally characterized by strife. It was a sort of Heraclitean perspective. Life as strife, a constant struggle to express it as fully as possible. The thing in itself as this, as the reality lying outside space and time, when it manifests within space and time, struggles within the individual item or element to manifest itself as fully as possible, and therefore comes into conflict with every other expression of the same will. Got me? So that because the will itself is a struggle, it's a dynamic without a cause and without an origin and without an end. It's not going anywhere in Schopenhauer's conception. And it simply, according to a rather complex formula, bursts out in the world, the multiform world, and is fully represented in every object within the multiform world. Therefore, every object is, so to speak, in competition and conflict with every other. And his own conception of life, not just human life, but all life, was one of a painful struggle for survival, a painful struggle to fully manifest whatever level of objectification it was capable of. This is why he's notoriously described as a pessimist. He saw the fundamental reality of things as a constant struggle for survival, as it manifests within individuals. It manifests always totally within every individual because it's impartite. and within every individual element of reality, it struggles to fulfill itself. So there's always competition for space, competition for resources, competition for ego expansion in our case, and so on and so forth. There's always conflict and strife. At the same time, he does acknowledge, in some of the most beautiful and difficult passages, he does acknowledge the extraordinary, beautiful pattern which through which life manifests itself. The crystals, the intricate detail of a leaf, and so forth, all manifest this fundamental reality beyond space and time as fully as they can, but inevitably in conflict. The snowflake is burned by the sun, the leaf is eaten by the worm, and so on. So he saw the will as something inherently painful. His own analysis of pleasure was as simply relief from pain. And his analysis of this does bear quite a lot of reflection. But that fundamentally life is a struggle. And we don't notice it because we have usually enough success to still hope. And please, I hope we'll get out of this by the end of the day, if I can find my way. I'm in the labyrinth. But yes, he saw the will as manifesting in all things and as inherently painful and even disgusting, because it is just so painful, so bound up with pain, so incomplete, so unfulfilled. It's not going anywhere. It's just a constant struggle. And his description of human desire is really very much a description of addiction. It was before that sort of conception arose, but the way in which you fulfill a desire and you feel some satisfaction, the satisfaction disappears, new desire arises. And again, very pertinently and very much in tune with what the Buddha said, he showed that desire often obscures its own pain because its eye is on fulfillment, if you see what I mean. You don't realise that you're actually in pain when you're desiring. But of course, desire is unfulfillment. But you're already thinking of the satisfaction, so it obscures your present pain. So it's a grim but very realistic view of life from a certain dimension. So he sees the salvation, if you like, his soteriology, his idea of what you can do about it in terms of abandonment, renunciation of the will. He sees aesthetics as a short period, a short interval of relief from the tyranny of the will. And he sees ethics as the beginnings of a struggle to give up the will, because what unethical behaviour is the over-assertion of the will as it manifests in you against the will as it manifests in others, and the suppression of your awareness of the will in others. That's unethical. Ethics, in the first place, is refraining from that, and then in the second place, it's actually wanting to enhance the life in others, and ultimately, it's wanting even to enhance it to the point of sacrificing it in yourself. But ultimately, his philosophy eventuates in renunciation, complete renunciation of the will, through ascetic practice on the one hand, and he was distantly aware of Buddhist meditation and of Hindu meditation. He was a lifelong student of the Upanishads in a Latin translation of a Persian translation, done by Shah Jahan's eldest son, who did the Taj Mahal, just a little cultural sidelight, Muhammad Daud. So he was aware of ascetic practice, he was aware of religious practice, he was aware of it in Christianity and believed that this was the true meaning of Christianity. And he saw the answer, so to speak, in the complete renunciation of the will. He was at pains to explain that this complete renunciation of the will is not negative. It's peace. It's relief from suffering, and so on. There's a brilliant discussion right at the end of The World as Will and Representation of what this means. So this is where I part company, because it seems to me that although this is in a certain sense quite true, quite accurate, there is a dimension of the will that needs to be renounced, that needs to be gone beyond. But it seems to me that the best way of thinking about the thing in itself is not in terms of the will as its highest manifestation. But before I go into that, I realise I do need to fill in a little bit more background. Schopenhauer believed that this will, the will to live, the life force, manifested hierarchically. It manifested on different levels. And he gives an account of those levels, which is remarkably close to the five niyamas, or the four niyamas, let's say, of later Buddhist commentary, which we've been talking about a lot here. The level of, as it were, biological explanation, biological life. Sorry, the level of physical inorganic life, the level of organic life, the level of perceptual awareness, perceptual consciousness, and the level of ethical consciousness. These are the first four niyamas. They're regularities, forms of conditionality, ways in which conditions arise. On one level, they arise in accordance with, let's say, the laws of physics and chemistry. One thing arises on the basis of gravity, or of my physics and chemistry is so far away I can't remember them. But some sort of chemical reaction, which is governed by laws that you can discern. And then at the level of biology and botany, photosynthesis and so forth determine the way in which the organism works. And then what's called in Buddhism manoniyama is the perceptual level of mind as it begins to emerge, and that it's governed by laws of conditionality. So Schopenhauer very closely follows this schema, because it's an obvious one, in terms of levels of evolution, you could say, even to think in those terms. And he did seem to have an evolutionary idea in 1820. So he sees the life force, I'm using my term, not his, or one that he only uses occasionally, the will, as manifesting on different levels, manifesting on the level of inorganic matter in terms of the laws of gravity and of impenetrability and so on, all kinds of laws to do with physical matter. He saw it manifesting within plants and so forth in terms of stimulus and response. He saw it manifesting within the animal realm in terms of perception, and he saw it manifesting in the human realm in terms of conception. So it very closely maps our general understanding of these things and what we've been exploring a great deal in looking at the Dharma more recently. So, yes, thus far we can sort of follow him. And you can see that when he's talking about the will as we generally experience it, it's at the level of conception. We're experiencing it at the level of conception as the drive for us as human beings to fulfill ourselves as organisms. That's what he's talking about. We can become aware of that. And for him, that is the highest character of the thing in itself, of reality. And therefore, he has to talk in terms of transcending the thing in itself, transcending the will. I think that leaves us with a curious sense of incompleteness and a sense of dissatisfaction. And this is where the fifth niyama comes into play, the Dhamma niyama. The niyama that begins to come into play, the law, the form of conditionality that comes into play once we begin to leave behind our attachment to ourselves under the headings of space, time, causality, self and other. Once we begin to see that we are not a self, we are not a separate, fixed identity, another form of conditionality begins to unfold within us, to which we have direct access. In the same way as we've got direct access to the life force in us as the will that leads us to strive for our own survival. Feeling hungry, getting food, feeling thirsty, getting thirst, feeling sex, satisfying it, and so on. We feel another dimension of drive manifesting within us, another force manifesting within us that carries us beyond the narrow confines of subject and object, the narrow confines of space and time. We feel ourselves lifted by that force, which is simply the highest manifestation of reality. So that if reality is the force that is behind, so to speak, all the representations of our experience, it finds its highest expression in that drive within us to fulfill ourselves in Buddhahood, in complete transcendence, in the complete renunciation, letting go of self-identification, in the complete identification with life everywhere, compassionate identification with life everywhere, in the sense of ourselves as serving life itself, you could say. As the Buddha, after his enlightenment, spoke of serving the Dhamma, serving the truth, living in dependence upon the truth. So this this force that Schopenhauer, so to speak, leaves at its highest in the will that leads our bodies to survive, I think we're better thinking of as passing beyond will at that level to a drive to fulfill itself in the highest possible manifestation of the highest possible realization, the highest possible service of life, the highest possible relinquishment of self-attachment. So that it's not a vacuity, it's not an emptiness in the sense of a blank. It's a greater and greater fulfillment of the inner meaning of life. So, to me, and I'm realizing I'm skating quite hastily over a large argument, but perhaps I'm just giving you the outlines of something that needs to be filled in later. But it seems to me that in the end, what you have to say is that the thing in itself is Dharma. The thing in itself is Dharma, is reality, is the ultimate meaning of things, the ultimate order of things. Behind all our representations is Dharma. And Dharma not only is behind all our representations, as it were, considered objectively, it's within our own representation subjectively. It's what animates us and carries us beyond ourselves if we allow it to. If we give ourselves up to it, if we serve it, if we learn to manifest it and allow it to flourish within us, it carries us beyond ourselves. So, with great respect, Schopenhauer, You are a greater man than me and a greater thinker than me. But I think that your conception of will is too limited, and that we need to expand it, need to expand the conception of what the inner dimension of everything is, to include its highest possible manifestations in, well, for us, the Buddha is the representation of that highest manifestation. The Buddha is the highest manifestation of reality, the highest manifestation of life. He's the manifestation of life that fully and adequately expresses the real inner meaning of life. Fully and adequately expresses the Dharma. But it's in all of us, because all life expresses or emerges from, or yes, expresses the Dharma. But it expresses it at different levels, to different degrees, with different possibilities of further manifestation. In us, it has the possibility of the highest manifestation. If we can only catch that sort of wind blowing within us and allow it to blow us further, it carries us to Buddhahood itself. The inner meaning of everything is finally revealed in the Buddha. The thing in itself ultimately is the Dharma. You could even say is the Buddha. This, I believe, is what's implied, for instance, by the figure of Ratnasambhava in the 5 Buddha Mandala. Probably some of you are not familiar with this. I'm not going to explain it fully, but we have an image, a composite symbol of 5 Buddha figures which represent different aspects of the fully enlightened mind. One of those figures, who sits in the southern quarter, the golden figure sitting with a hand in the gesture of generosity, called Ratnasambhava, the jewel-born one, and is sometimes been called the Buddha of beauty. And he represents the wisdom that sees, this the wisdom of equality, the wisdom that sees everything as fundamentally the same, fundamentally having the same ultimate nature, the same ultimate character, sees the same, to use the terms that I've been talking about, the same thing in itself in everything, the same reality in everything, the same Dharma in everything, and sees it, therefore, as beautiful. When you see with the eye of the Buddha, when you see with the eye of reality, you see everything as beautiful. Our ordinary aesthetic experience is a little glimpse through the window, occasioned by particular objects that, for some reason, a particular combination of colours or sounds or whatever, allows us to glimpse through to the beauty that is in everything. But the eye of the enlightened sees that beauty in everything, completely spontaneously and naturally and perpetually. So that this, I hope, offers a glimpse of how we might take Schopenhauer and work him more fully into a Buddhist context that we're more familiar with. That the Dhamma Niyama, for those of you who are familiar with the term, Niyama simply means law in the sense of a law of science. The Dhamma Niyama is the ultimate inner nature of everything. It's not static, it's a dynamic inner nature, which is pressing up, so to speak, within us, pressing up within everything. It manifests as gravity. It manifests as photosynthesis. It manifests as perception. It manifests as volition, therefore under the heading of karma. And it manifests at its most full as dharma. But this is where Schopenhauer is so useful. It is a single, not thing, it is a single undifferentiated reality that lies behind everything, manifesting differentiated but nonetheless whole within everything. So I hope that I've at least untied a few of the knots from yesterday by departing a little from Schopenhauer, and I hope that I've given you at least some food for thought. This requires really much fuller exploration, which I'll be trying to do a bit later, but I wanted at least to sketch in the territory for further reflection and examination. There's one other area where I want to conclude by, I won't say quarrelling with Schopenhauer, but picking out something from Schopenhauer and suggesting that it needs further amplification. He discusses, as I've already indicated, the two principal modes of knowledge that we have, the knowledge through perception, knowledge through conception. And he hints at other forms of knowing, the direct consciousness, immediate consciousness of, in his terms, will within us, the life force within us. Then our knowledge of the object outside causality in aesthetic experience. And then our knowledge of the life in others in ethical experience. So all of this implies another mode or faculty of knowledge. And this, I think, is a really important area for us to take on board and examine. I've explored it in other sets of rambles, particularly around the theme of imagination. Unless we recognise that we've got other ways of knowing, or an other way of knowing, that gives us a direct access to the inner dimension of reality, that gives us direct access to reality itself, you could say, we can't really practice the Dhamma. We are simply materialist. A materialist is somebody who takes the representation as reality and sees the ending of that representation in death as the end of everything. So unless we recognise that there's something beyond perception and conception, that we do have another means of access to reality, we can't really practice the Dhamma. And a lot of our work in the Dhamma is exercising, learning to exercise this other limb of knowledge, you might say. Learning to exercise it through meditation. Because in meditation you're trying to awaken a way of experiencing which is not merely through perception and conception. In fact, you're trying to completely quieten conception as much as you possibly can, and to refine perception so that it begins to transcend the forms of space and time. So in the highest forms of meditation, as it were, samsaric meditation, even mundane meditation, you're going beyond space. You're realizing the infinitude of space. So you're sort of using perception at its most attenuated. Subject and object are coming so close together that they barely can be differentiated. Space and time are becoming so exploded, you might say, that they barely operate. Causality becomes almost meaningless. I remember Sangharakshita writing to me once saying that he'd been at our retreat centre in Spain, men's ordination retreat centre in Spain for a while, and he wrote back saying that he was having an experience of the complete meaninglessness of time. He did come back, but that's the sort of experience we're trying to explore through meditation. Then we're trying to explore through our ethics the opening to the life around us, not just of the human life, of the animal life. That's why we're vegetarian, if we are. Even our ecological awareness of nature itself as alive at some level. We're trying to develop that. In our communication with each other, we're trying to go beyond a communication which is merely conceptual or perceptual, which is merely the exchange of information. We're trying to, as it were, communicate directly vibrate directly one to another. And that's the extraordinary significance of a community such as we try to gather around a centre like the London Buddhist Centre. We're trying to create a context within which we can all begin to exercise this other limb of knowledge, where people recognise it, understand it, appreciate it. You know, there are many people who do know this outside the Buddhist fold. It's not a Buddhist thing, it's a human thing. Buddhists simply have, to my mind, a very clear way of thinking about it and talking about it. But we're trying to bring that into operation with other people who experience it, know it, value it. We're trying to relate to each other increasingly with that faculty of knowledge alive. And I think the fact that Schopenhauer never was able to fully identify and name this limited his philosophy. It's very interesting. Kant did speculate that there might be another form of knowing. And he's quite interested in Swedenborg, but he read him and said it was just sort of bad science. I haven't read Swedenborg, so I can't comment. But he was open to the possibility that there was another mode. Schopenhauer does seem to recognise that other mode, but he never fully clarifies what it is. He talks about it really mostly in terms of this immediate consciousness, immediate intuition. But it seems to me that the full identification of it leads to a larger understanding of what life is. I think this is, please, Schopenhauer, forgive me, I think this is his problem, that he was working within the bounds of philosophy as it came to him in the 19th century, and working brilliantly and vastly stretching those bounds in a way that even many modern philosophers haven't realised. The greatest, like Schopenhauer, Heidegger, and Wittgenstein and Heidegger did. And it's often said that Wittgenstein, the early Wittgenstein, is sort of a discussion with Schopenhauer. But most Western philosophy, and I'm not familiar with the most recent philosophy, hasn't caught up with this. So he's an extraordinary thinker. But I think as modern Buddhists practicing within the Triratna community, we've got a little bit of a head start on him because we've got ways of working with this other faculty of knowledge, which are much more which are explicit, and we've got a way of thinking about the inner dimension of things that is whole, that we never have to abandon, we never have to renounce reality, which is a rather extraordinary conception. We have to allow reality to fulfill itself at its highest in Buddhahood. So whilst I believe that Schopenhauer is an exceptionally important thinker and that he still has a great deal to teach us as modern Western Buddhists, modern Buddhists practicing within the Western world and within the framework of thought of the post-Enlightenment, European Enlightenment, I think he's still got a great deal to tell us. But the two areas where I think we need to be on our guard, so to speak, is one, this recognition that there is a faculty that can perceive, can know, which is different from perception and conception, that can know the thing in itself. He does implicitly know there is such a thing, but he doesn't name it and clarify it, and doesn't show how it works and how we develop it. And he doesn't see the continuity of the manifestation of the thing in itself all the way through to Buddhahood itself. He sees a complete break and the complete renunciation at the level of will. We do have to renounce at that level. We have to give up our self-attachment. But that giving up of self-attachment isn't the giving up of reality. It's aligning ourselves with reality at a higher level. So I have to conclude without giving you time to ask any questions. I was determined not to let you ask any questions because I'm sure I'd entangle both you and me in further skeins of confusion. But seriously, I just got timed out. But I have to hand over to Jnanavacha and conclude in that way. But I really hope I've whetted your appetite to look more closely at Schopenhauer himself, and I hope I've given you at least my angle on where one might be, let's say, on guard with Schopenhauer, and recognise how far he's taken us and how far he's held us back, as it were. And really to salute one of our great ancestors who's made possible our presence here today and made possible our discussion of the deepest issues of life. Thanks.